All right, good morning, everybody. Happy January 12th and a happy new year to y'all. Haven't seen you in a month, but glad y'all could be with us today on this. I got a great, well, first of all, let me start off by saying we got a different format just for today. We got a panelist, a bunch of people have signed up. So we can't see y'all, but we'll have opportunity to have conversations in the chat. But just so you'll know, this is just a new format just for the day. But this is a big day. Not only do I have two special guests, but it is National Kiss a Ginger Day. Hey, giddy up for the gingers out there. It is National Hot Tea Day. But most importantly, on a Friday after Christmas and before a long weekend, it's Work Harder Day. This is a unique celebration that encourages us to ramp up our efforts and push our limits. Hashtag Work Harder Day. All right. With that, we'll work a little harder today. A couple of highlight notes before I bring the panelists on. Big news around the world. There's an election happening, not on Monday. There is one on Monday, but more importantly, one on tomorrow in Taiwan for a new president. Talking about stabilization of the world global markets. That's going to be a big one. So keep an eye out for that. U.S. trends right now, market volatility, some good news on stocks, but also some up. We ticked up on inflation last month to 3.4%. So we're going to have to watch what that does. We're seeing continuation of layoffs and downsizing in white collar jobs. And I guess this is the model of let's try to make most of our profits and do more with less. So I'll have to keep a track on that. Lots of new reports out on what's happening with remote work. Is it paying off? I think it pays off for the companies because they have lower overhead, but you're seeing less promotions and less mentorship through people that work from home full time. So lots of studies out. I think there was an article in the journal about that this week as well. So just FYI. And again, we got a big election coming up on Monday, the Iowa caucuses, below freezing temperatures all weekend out there. So last push for second place in Iowa. South Carolina, General Assembly's back. They didn't do much this week except talk about what they want to do this year, which is not much. Let's see. But big score this week with USC and Clemson meeting with all 17 technical college systems and working out a plan to accept up to 30 credits. That's a huge benefit. Now, just so you'll know, the other schools in South Carolina already had a matriculation agreement with the tech schools. Carolina and Clemson had not. So that's the big story here, that those schools actually now have an agreement. It could save a lot of money, and especially in a day that we need to put more emphasis on technical college education. That's a big deal. So good kudos to them. And I want to give out a shout out to longest serving public servant in the country is today. Nikki Setzler has announced his resignation. This is his last term representing Lexington and Richland County. Got elected in 1976. And his first opponent that he beat in 1976 was Joe Wilson. Little factoid there that this good senator filled me in on a couple weeks ago. I didn't know that. So anyway, thanks for his leadership. He's been a great supporter of business for years and years. So we appreciate Nikki and his service. And for that matter, Dick Harpootlian threw his hat in the ring for that seat as well. So enough about stuff around the state. I want just those were highlights, but the big show today is having my two dear friends, Carlos Phillips and Brian Dearberry from Greenville and Charleston, join me today, my counterparts. They're a lot of fun. We have a great time, but they're really smart guys that actually make me look less smart. But I want to welcome them to the crowd. We're glad to see Steve Jobs filling in for Brian today. Just kidding, Carlos. You got the tire going. We're glad to have y'all. So we do this kind of chat once a month just to fill people in on what's happening, but most importantly, understand what's going on with them and and what's happening with our partners. And so we welcome you and your partners that are able to join us today. How are things around the state? Let's start with the chair of this mighty group, Mr. Derberry. Tell me this, what's happening in Charleston?
It's an exciting start to the year. I think we share similar optimism throughout the state of South Carolina on the resiliency of our economies. I think Carl did a great job pointing out that, a lot of our larger employers are very cautious about our national, international economy, and it'll be interesting to see how we get inflation tamed as we move through 2024. I think we're seeing some caution in our financial sector, which would be to be expected. We just had a great exercise last year as we rolled into the end of the year. We had 55 of our leaders across the 3 counties come together and develop a 20-year plan called People First, 5 strategies for the next 20 years. And it's interesting how it's a litmus test for us every time we get together with groups of our members. And we'll be focusing on 5 strategy areas: early childhood education, equitable and high quality education in our K-12 system, housing attainability, multimodal infrastructure system, and then how we can make our state work more sufficiently and effectively around the application of capital for all types of projects. So just had a coffee with the president last week, and we said, hey, when you look out into 2024, what are your greatest challenges? Well, 4 of those 5 got identified. So we're excited to begin to build dedicated multi-sector plans across those 5, which we'll implement at the end of the year. And I'm sure when Carl and Carlos talk about what they're facing, those are similar challenges. I call those forever opportunities because I don't know if you ever get those fully wrestled to the ground. And I think that all 3 of our metro regions have been thoughtful about how to tackle those. So that's exciting in and of itself. And, off to a good start. We're excited about that plan, and had a great annual legislative reception last Thursday with over 250 people, almost 100 electeds. So that public-private partnership, I think, is going to be the key to truly moving forward with those important ingredients for future success.
Election year turnout's great, isn't it? Great. Thank you. Carlos, how's the upstate?
Everything is going well in the upstate, but I first want to thank you, Carl, for not just the program, but for inviting folks like Brian and I to spend some time sharing with you. Great opportunity for that. And I want to thank everybody else for joining the call. Things are going great in the upstate, and I think that is a shared sentiment throughout our respective regions. Things are going great. Specifically here in the upstate, and specifically Greenville County, we're trying to prepare for an additional 250,000 people, additional 250,000 people living here over the next 20 years. And that population growth won't occur primarily through natural births. It's in migration. And we're dealing with some of the opportunities that result from that. That's about 20,000 folks a year, additional folks per year living in the county. So we're trying to be thoughtful and put together some thoughtful plans on how we can best prepare for that, so that the folks who've lived here for a while continue to enjoy the place, and our new residents they continue to feel that they're moving to the place that they thought they were. And there's a balance there that we're trying to reach. Business is going great. Carl, your overview of the economic indicators strongly suggests that inflation did tick up a little bit, which I think may influence the Fed's decisions on when to lower some interest rates. But everything is going, everything on Main Street seems to be going fine. We do have some headwinds, some that we hope our state legislature can help us with. I think we're all experiencing some businesses that are experiencing some challenges, up to many closing because of the skyrocketing insurance premiums.
Okay.
And we need some help from our friends at State House on that. Also, Joint and Several's got some folks concerned, and rightfully so. If you're a business, an incident happens, and you're 1% at fault, you could be held 100% liable for for that, and that just doesn't sound like a real fair or business friendly arrangement. So need some help with that. But I think I can state that for Greenville, it's almost as though the economy is exceeding despite or in spite the challenges and the headwinds that we're experiencing. Very resilient, and just refuse to be taken down.
So let's go back to real quick on the growth. If you look back, just this week, U-Haul and United Van Rentals announced their data this year that South Carolina's top migration state. There was a study done from July last year to July this year. We actually were the highest number percentage-wise of growth in any state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these growing pains that we're going to see are significant. In fact, between July 2022 and July 2023, we saw 90,000 people move to South Carolina. That is equal to the fourth largest city in South Carolina, which is Mount Pleasant. So if we've got this continued growth from a chamber perspective, what do y'all see? What do we need to do to start helping our General Assembly friends think not just 5, but 10 years and 20 years down the road? Brian, what do y'all, I know you just talked about it for a little bit, but what about the infrastructure needs?
Yeah, I jokingly say that I have 2 tattoos on my forearms. One is smarter and the other is faster. And I think we're at a place with the demographic data that you both have shared where we can no longer have the luxury of behaving like we did 20 years ago. So I don't care if it's municipal, county, state. We just have to be much more immediate focused on true infrastructure needs. And then also, I think to your point, Carl, we should have a long-term plan for our state that looks at the next 50 years. I like our problem. I'd rather have 90,000 people coming here than 90,000 people leaving.
Yeah.
We've all been in markets where we've seen that type of exodus. And then the challenges are even more exacerbated. The reality is, though, we have a wealth of opportunity, but we just need to be more thoughtful about engaging private sector leaders that have global experience or multi-market experience. And then the other thing we're looking at is, I think you're probably both familiar with strategic doing, which is a civic engagement tool that gets people rallying around opportunities to take hold of their problems and move forward. So remove the finger pointing and get people shoulder to shoulder around opportunities for housing attainability, for density, for rapid transit, things that will become a part of who we are. And it's better if they become a part sooner as opposed to later, because then you're dealing with sprawl, you're dealing with more infrastructure needed. We are continually encouraging our private sector volunteer leaders to be crystal clear on those 3 to 4 messages with electeds. And I think we can handle it. But if we get too far behind the curve, we visited Austin, Texas this year for our Metro leadership visit. And for 20 years, they put off dealing with their infrastructure challenges. Now they're going to need to spend $6 billion in the next 5 years to try to address them. So it's that old Mark Twain thing, swallow the toad when it's small, because when it becomes a full bullfrog, it'll choke you. So I just think we got to be wiser, sounder, quicker with regard to the brutal facts that come with great population growth and great business growth.
Carlos, are you writing that down like I am? I mean,
I am,
they usually
yeah,
give me a hard
yeah,
time about some Carlisms, but toad to bullfrog.
was that in,
Swallow it when it's a toad, because
Yeah.
when it's a bullfrog, it'll choke you. I mean,
That's
we're
awesome.
we're on the cusp of that. I think we're there with housing attainability in all of our markets. There's a recognition that over the past 20 years, we haven't, on an annual basis, been able to put into the market the right number of dwellable housing units of all types to be able to stay ahead of the population growth. So how do we accomplish that? How do we get better at it? And there are great models across the state on housing attainability, but we've almost got to put it in a daily innovation lab type framework to really begin to tackle these tough issues.
Carlos, before you answer, there was a question that was thrown out by Laura McKinney, which is a great question, and it is a nice tag to this. But she goes, "What's your greatest concern with the in-migration? Social issues, housing issues, education, and how do we maintain our culture?" So with that growth, you want to throw that out, answer that one?
yeah, so I don't know how much those are concerns for me more than they are opportunities. And they're all significant opportunities. I do like, I'm intrigued by Brian's reference to the Mark Twain swallow the toad quote. I didn't read that in either Huck Finn or any of the other great works by Mr. Clemens, but I like that because we do have some opportunities today that we can address while they're still somewhat manageable.
Mm-hmm.
The imagery of the toad growing is quite profound, but I do think it is clear, it is very analogous, quite analogous to the opportunity that we've got. We don't want to be like Austin and wait
Mm-hmm.
20 years because to fix some of the issues that they knew about years ago. Those opportunities, those issues tend to compound, and we don't want to get to that. We took our leadership trip this year to Nashville. Similar situation, and I'll cite specifically on their transit, and they, part of it is maybe they waited too long, but the other part is it was a contentious battle to get the legislation and the measures passed to address the issue. So that took a lot of time. And so I think they're on the right path right now, but now they got to go faster. It's going to cost them more money. And the community continues to grow. And so we don't want to experience that. But someone made the point earlier that the opportunities that we have, I'd much rather have ours than those. If 90,000 people migrated to the state of South Carolina, they moved from somewhere else. That's talent that's moving from somewhere else. That's education that's moving from somewhere else. That's investment that's moving from somewhere else. So these are now opportunities that we get to capitalize on now. And I think our question is, how will we best do that?
Let's change it up for a second. We started this thing a couple of years ago. The three of us started a Metro Chamber legislative agenda. And it was a way for us, the three largest cities in the state, to coalesce around some issues that some, like the state chamber, didn't really care about, and nor should they. They were issues that pertained more to local stuff. We're going to release that next week. There are a lot of hot topics on there, things that of the issues that we've talked a little bit about, we talked about joint and several. Other big workforce is a big issue, obviously. Childcare, energy. Of those, now we'll leave tort since we've already talked about that. What's the other biggest issue that we think we need to address at the State House this year for the viability of our members and the continued growth of the state?
I'll let our distinguished chair of the Metro Chamber Coalition to discuss that.
Why, thank you, Carlos. That's so kind. Um,
Thump, thump.
I think there are a couple that are closely connected. And as Carl said, we've already touched on joint and several liability. When I think about the future workforce, making sure we today have things that occur like what Clemson and University of South Carolina just did to get our statewide system at the higher education level and technical college level coordinating effectively. I think one of the other things we're finding is that all three of our communities are identifying the specific fields of work and professions where we're underserviced. So how do we begin to get coordination across our metro markets and our state with regard to things like auto manufacturing and other areas, whether it's advanced assembly, IT software, healthcare, obviously what we're doing with the port and logistics statewide, where we begin to focus channeling individuals into those career opportunities. They're very robust. And obviously we've had a lot of success across state with automobile and tire manufacturing. So I think getting coordinated there will be powerful. I think we have a true crisis with regard to early education and childcare. We hear from so many of our employers that it inhibits their ability to both attract and maintain workforce in the years where families are having children. And I think we really need to get our arms around that. So those are two that jump off the page for me. I think one that's kind of a sleeping giant is energy and energy sufficiency. I think in the years ahead, with the growth we've just talked about and the current demands on our system, we're going to have to be very wise as a state with regard to what comprises our energy resources and how they can be put to use. And are they going to be sufficient with the growth that we have in the years ahead, both from a citizen's perspective and an industry perspective? So I really like the agenda. I know that when you're having coffee with Carl, I'm sure there will be some type of amazing follow-up, and hopeful that he can share that agenda with everybody that's tuned in for the show. I think you'll be pleased that the three largest metro areas are working on this, along with Myrtle Beach and Rock Hill, and even Charlotte's coming over the border because of the impact they have on the upstate. So you got 5 metros working together to help our state legislators appreciate what businesses across the state of South Carolina feel is important.
Thanks. I want to echo, I think the sleeper issue for us over the next couple of years is the energy issue. With the rapid growth and the lack of new production, new means of providing energy is a significant challenge long term. And quite frankly, the biggest issue is the natural gas. And so I know the governor's put a lot of emphasis on this, Department of Commerce, and I think you attended a meeting the other night where they said this is the year of energy at the State Chamber annual. They're back to General Assembly, whatever the event they had the other night. I think they talked about that. But the point being that we've got to find a new, if we want to continue to grow and continue to bring in new companies, that we're maxed out on how much natural gas we have and energy production as it is. So we've got to start thinking about the that type of the grid and the infrastructure that supports energy. So I agree with all of what y'all said, but I think that one is this big sleeper.
Carl, if I could interject for just a
Yeah.
moment, and we've talked a lot about a lot of specific issues and opportunities today, but I just want to introduce and present a broader opportunity that we have here, and it's listed on our agenda, and that is continue to encourage our electeds to facilitate an environment where businesses can succeed. Let businesses do business. Get out of the way. There's operational decisions that should be left to a business. I think that spirit will allow businesses in South Carolina to continue to prosper and our economy to grow the right way. Now, not promoting the wild, wild west, if you will, but businesses know how to make those operational decisions that are necessary. And we need to continue to have an environment where they feel comfortable doing so. Now, that's not a specific item, but just in the broader business climate perspective, it's critical. It's important. And we don't want to see a lot of measures that restrict a business's ability to make operational decisions. Let them eat.
Yep.
But that's more of a business climate opportunity for us than anything.
So we got a question in the chat box, and this is great for y'all, for both of y'all. How are your chambers specifically preparing local communities for changes in quality of life due to rapid business growth? And all the things that we've talked about are a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what else are y'all doing to help manage? I mean, growing pains have a lot of tentacles.
Yeah.
And they impact a lot of different things, but quality of life is something that has been the catalyst for Charleston's growth since the early 90s. And what you're seeing and reading about Greenville right now is all quality of life issues. So how do you protect that?
Well, I think I can say for all three of our organizations, I mean, the chamber can't do everything. But one of the things we try to do is first inform. So this is what's coming. This is what we need to prepare for. And then convene people around so that we can take the conversations beyond the chamber. But convene people around those opportunities. And then try to mobilize. Okay, what's it going to take to get from point A to point B to get us to our desired state? I think you all will echo this. A chamber does nothing alone or in a vacuum. But our lane is quite valuable. We are excellent informers, conveners. I think where we can step up our efficacy and our impact is in mobilizing. How can we influence in such a way that we more effectively move these things, move these needs and opportunities forward? That's what we are doing. That's what we're continuing to try to do here in Greenville, and I suspect you're trying to do the same things in your respective communities.
Carl, I agree strongly with what Carlos shared. And when you look at the name of that 20-year plan, oddly enough, it's not business first. It's people first. There was an intentionality in that room and looking at what would benefit all soon to be 1 million greater Charlestonians. I think we all recognize that when you get the region right and you get its ingredients right, then businesses and employees thrive. And all three of our organizations are geared that way. And I can assure you, not every chamber in America is built that way. I think more and more of them are today, and the very best ones are built that way. They look at the overall environment. They look at the things that lead to a high quality of life. And I think the question to ask in return to that very good question is, what is the definition of quality of life in your region? What are the factors that comprise quality of life? And we have a wonderful peer that we all enjoy working with. Her name's Rebecca Ryan. And Rebecca told a story. She was out in Los Angeles, and she is I affectionately say she's the godmother of young professionals. She started the young professionals movement in our country. And she was presenting about what this community could do to encourage young professionals. And there was an older woman in the front row, and she raised her hand and she said, "What about us older professionals? What do we get out of this?" And Rebecca just kindly said, "Do you like areas that you can walk across your community on sidewalks or bike trails? Do you like nice parks? Do you like good restaurants?" And the woman said, "Well, sure, I like those." And she said, "You just define what we're working for with regard to everybody." And I think that's the beauty of thinking about what is the definition of quality of life and how can as many people as possible have the opportunity to be part of that. And I think we spend lots of time doing that. I think that's one of the best ways that we can tackle this issue. And I think you introduce people as they move into your community into a set of principles with regard to how things work with regard to quality of life in your community. Because it's not going to stop. We just talked about two places, Austin and Nashville. They thought they would do certain things to slow down growth. They're growing just as rapidly as they were 20 years ago when they said we're going to slow down growth. So you have to be wise in how you manage it and actively involve your population in defining quality of place, quality of life.
My good friend Bob Coble just asked a question. Bob's former mayor of Columbia. What role will transit play in the years ahead? I know what Charleston's working on. Greenville, I'm not so clear about. Just talk about mass transit. It's a big thing for us. We've got a rural community / urban market here, and it plays a vital role. Carlos, what are y'all doing to address mass transit?
Yeah, well, I think we first try to talk more about mobility. Because when we talk about mass transit, oftentimes that tends to limit the conversation to our buses, if you will, which are very important. We need additional funding for that. Our public transit system needs to be optimized from a routes perspective. How do we get people from the outskirts of the city, of the community, into the central business district more effectively? Those are important. I'm excited, and I'm trying to figure out to what level the rest of my community is excited about the rail, high-speed rail.
That's coming through the Amtrak expansion.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I understand it's been on the radar for quite some time. And it'd be interesting to see how that measure advances. But also when we talk about mobility, Brian, you talked about bike trails and sidewalks, walking trails, and all those. It's mobility. How do we get people and goods from where they are to where they want to be? And there are a lot of different, modalities for that. And that's a big opportunity for us, along with everything else that we've talked about. How do we enhance and improve our ability to walk and chew gum simultaneously? How do we improve our ability to focus on multiple priorities? And I think that's going to be one of the one of the bigger opportunities for our community is there's so much we need to do. We really can't afford to try to do one at a time.
Right.
You know, how can we work on these things in unison? And that's probably going to be our biggest challenge.
Brian, update on your project for transit in Charleston. Y'all got some.
Yeah, the Low Country Rapid Transit project will run from slightly south of Somerville all the way down to the peninsula. 19 stops, high-speed bus lanes with buses that look like metro cars. Should be a 45-minute shot all the way downtown and then back home. Excited about it, working with the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester Council of Governments, lots of private sector partners. So it's tracking. It will be the first of what will probably be 2 more eventual sets of high-speed bus lane routes. So I think a lot of it now, Carlos made the good point. Okay, when you get it finished, you got to be doing everything that addresses it. So equitable transportation-oriented development around those 19 stops. What happens to the last mile when it ends up on the peninsula or ends up back on Somerville? And I think the other recognition and making some good visits, Salt Lake City was one of them. The goal is not to have everybody ride it. The goal is to have somewhere between 8 to 15% of the cars that are on the road currently utilize it. And that dramatically cuts down on the level of congestion on our current highways and secondary arterials. And it also allows a mode of transportation, high-speed internet access. You can do your work. It'll be a lot calmer than sitting in your car for an hour over that same traffic pattern. So I do believe it's important that all of our communities begin to look at this. And again, it's that smarter, faster thing. Could we have done it 20 years ago? Probably. We need to do it now with regard to the growth and the challenges of continuing to think we're going to take care of it by just pouring concrete and asphalt. That ain't going to do that. We know what the projections look like. So we have to have alternatives to, as Carlos said, multiple modes of transportation. We're going to look at our water. What's the possibility for ferrying people from Mount Pleasant or Daniel Island to downtown? So looking at all those different components of how we move people and product around.
All right, we're running short on time, but just as a thought, what are you reading right now, Carlos? What book did you go to bed with last night?
What book did I go to bed?
That you can tell us.
So last night I went to bed reading a Harvard Business Review article.
Having trouble sleeping these days?
The article focused on today's executive presence and how it has changed over the past 20 years. So, for example, 20 years ago, if the 3 chamber CEOs of the 3 largest communities in South Carolina were meeting with a group of businesses, first of all, we'd be meeting in person, even on a Friday morning. And we'd probably been in a suit and tie.
Yes.
Right?
Thank goodness those days are over.
Yeah. And the article almost said today, if we had showed up, if we had tried to convene this meeting in person, A, wouldn't have happened. B, if we had expected everyone to show up in their Easter frocks, that wasn't going to happen either. And anyone who did, so I like Brian showing up with his sport coat, he's borderline. I mean, he's almost breaking the rule here.
That's the kindest thing you've ever said about me, that I'm borderline.
But it's just how executive presence has evolved.
Yeah.
And how now it's more about knowing your room, knowing the times that you're living in, and adapting to that. So it wasn't a book, but it was quite the good read
That's
from the
good.
Harvard Business Review. It's as close as I'll ever get to Harvard.
I'm not asking Brian that question because it would be so lofty that I wouldn't understand it. So what did you listen to today driving in? Did you listen to the radio or did you have a podcast that you listened to this morning, Brian?
I'm listening to a book, and I'll try to not make it lofty. It's a guy that I really admire. His name's Jim Dethmer, Dethmer, and it's the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And it's very much in line with what Carlos just shared about how you show up to your employees, your team, your family, your board of directors, and what type of commitments you make around your engagement or presence or positive impact on the different people that you're with every day. So it's really, really cool look at some commitments that make you more available, more receptive, more caring, better listener, better at follow through.
I'm going to Google this Swallow the Toad. I gotta find that book.
Wow.
There you go. There
I
you
gotta
go.
change my book habits. Listen, thank y'all. Really appreciate your time today, your insights as usual, but most importantly, your friendship. I want to thank Knowledge Perk. They sent us nice little cups to and some coffee. But if you've not been by Knowledge Perk, check it out. But really, really appreciate them sponsoring today. Gentlemen, I hope y'all have a fantastic Friday, great long weekend. We look forward to connecting with you soon. Folks that joined us, sorry it went a little long, but good insights today. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Carl. And
Thanks, Carl.
thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Brian.
Y'all be good. We'll see you
Have a good
soon.
weekend.
All right.
Have a great week. Bye.
Thanks a lot.